Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to do another mind-blowing WordPress tutorial, and we're going to do a deep dive into patterns and templates. For me, learning WordPress again a little while ago and learning the block editor, the patterns and templates were easily the most confusing aspect of the platform to try to get a handle on, to try to figure out how to deal with some of the challenges that they create. And just really trying to figure out when to use them, when not to use them, and what they're really good for. So I'm going to share all of that with you in this episode. We're going to take a deep dive. We're going to show some of the other things that might get caught up, and make sure that you've got all the information you need to get around some of the hiccups that you can encounter when dealing with some of this functionality. Okay. So the last couple videos, we did the WAMP installation. We did the saving an environment to get an image. We went through some really good plugins to use for high performance website. We then went in the last video, I think was probably the best so far, is we went through and did a deep dive on the block editor global settings. So if you have any questions about how to choose your fonts, how to make them available through your whole design library, colors, everything related to headers, and then a bunch of stuff in the layout that you need to be prepared for. So all of that's kind of covered in the last video. This is really the first step in actually getting into your design. In this video, we're just going to talk about templates and patterns and how they work and how they can be a real pain in the you-know-what. And then in the next video, we'll actually start building some patterns with the block editor so that you can build a good history of reusable components for your websites that you can use going forward for everything you're doing. Okay. The end result of all this is that you can, using the patterns and templates and some of your own creativity, you can build websites at least from a layout perspective, in just minutes, right? So that's kind of where all this is going. So I think it's worth the journey to get there, to figure out how a lot of the stuff works. And I haven't seen anyone else really explain it at this level, so I'm going to do it. All right, so a couple things. I went back and reset up our WordPress environment from our second tutorial. So I went to the previously stored image. So I've got all the base settings, all the base plugins. I've got 2 pages in this environment. Only one is published, and that's the home page. So we'll dive into that in a second. One thing I do want to show here is the settings reading tab. And our page is still set up with the default WordPress for the home page display, right? And the default here is always going to be your blog page. So remember, at its core, WordPress originally was a blogging framework, and I think it's become a lot more since then, but the default is always that your site is going to be ready to display blogs more than just a standard homepage with the hero section and all the other bells and whistles, okay? We're not building a blog site. We may have some blogs available through the site, but the primary function of the sites we're building are typically going to be business websites that you can build for customers very quickly and very easily. Do a lot of graphics work, which we'll dive into at a later point. But the idea here is that you're building a really nice, flashy, presentable, eye-catching business website. So I'm going to explain how the reading settings correlate back to the block editor templates in the Ollie theme, and show you some of the challenges that maybe you might run into if you're not aware how these settings affect your template choices. Okay, so template choices are a difficult thing in the block editor for some crazy reason. All right, so let's go explain. If I go into the editor, and you'll see here from the design portion of the page, right, I've got the navigation, which is almost meaningless because I can do navigation in my templates, pages, and patterns. I got my global styles, right, which we went through in the last episode. So I can click on those and access them here. I've got my pages, right? I've got one page published. This is our home page. If I go and select that to edit it, you'll see this is the default home page that's built with your WordPress deployment, right? So I haven't changed any of that. This is all the basic setup for that page. On the right-hand side, you can see the status of this page. It's currently published, so it's available. The published date, the slug is going to be the URL for this page. So if I go and actually look at this page, you can see the sample page name is actually the slug name, okay? So that's how you get to your page through the URL. The author, who's the person I'm logged in as currently, and then the template. So this is the template from the block editor library for the theme I've chosen that is assigned to this page. And I can go and change that, right? So I can click on the pages template. I can edit the template directly, which will bring me back into the template library. I can change the template. I can create a new one, which would be from scratch, which, you know, I could certainly do here. Or I could show the template and we can go in and start playing around with it directly from there, okay? But if I want to change the template, if I want to go to another template, you'll notice that I only have two selections here to choose from, right? I've got the page full width, no title template, and I've got the page with a sidebar template. To me, this is one of the most frustrating things with the block editor, in that it really restricts which templates it will allow you to access and which it will allow you to assign to any particular page, right? And I don't need the restriction personally, so we're going to show how to work around some of this stuff. But the idea here is that you'll quickly get frustrated trying to figure out why you can't assign certain templates to the pages that you're developing. And I'll explain as much of that here as we can. And a lot of it's related back to that reading setting in the settings menu, okay? So if we go back to our templates, you'll see here that I've got, what, I've got 8 templates here that I can choose from, right? So why did I only get to select 2? So this is, you know, part of the craziness of the template functionality that you're going to run into. In the full library with the Ollie theme, I've got an archives template, I've got an index template. They look very similar. I've got a full page template. I've got a page with sidebar template. I've got a 404 page, that's nice. I've got a pages template, right? So I've got pages, page with sidebar, pages, search results, and single posts, okay? So I think, you know, the intent here is still on WordPress being mostly a blogging site or a blogging framework, and a lot of the usage of templates is going to be related to blogging, right? So for me, developing business sites where I'm not doing a lot of blogging stuff, they're mostly useless at this point. So I don't really use them. I'm going to show you how I control the template library and what I do with them. But where I see them having the most usefulness in developing websites is with blog pages, or if you're doing a corporate site and you're allowing like content developers to come in and build new pages. Let's say you're developing products, right? Or software products or services, and you want your content team to build a page for a new service that you're going to be providing from your company. The template library is a great way that you can do that, right? You can build a page template for products, so you can make your own product page template, and then you can control the access from different user types to that page so that they can go in and spin up a new page, but you control the layout, you control the colors, you control where things are, all the margins, all the padding, all of that's built into that template page so that they're really restricted on the design side, and they really have a couple places where they can go and drop their content, develop it, save it, and have it be ready to publish. Then it can get reviewed, and you can move it through, sort of a development chain as you go and build stuff, okay? So to me, that's what templates are really good for. Otherwise, they just get in the way. They're a way to control and restrict design. And if I'm going in and building new pages for customers, I don't need to restrict and control my design at that level. Okay, so I'm mostly going to have very clean, empty templates, and I'll show you what those look like and how to use them. Okay, so that's point number one. Point number two is, one thing you'll notice here is that there's no front page templates, right? You can add that template in to your library by adding it. This is with the Ollie theme. So other themes will have a front page template built for you in the library by default. And now you start getting into the, is it a template or is it a pattern discussion, right? So Einhorn is Finkel, Finkel is Einhorn, for those of you who get the reference. And now I have to select a pattern for the template that I want to choose for my front page template, okay? So let's go walk through that again. I'm adding a new template for my front page, and I have to select a pattern for that template, okay? It doesn't really matter because I'm going to get rid of all this. So I'm going to choose the, the middle pattern there that was offered to me, and then we're going to save this for now, okay? And you'll notice, again, this is a blog front page, right? So, I've got a post here with an image. Hello, this is the title. This is the author, the date that it was published, right? And this is still going back to my home page, which was published in April. And then it's got a blurb and a categorization, right? And then if I want to move through various blog pages, I can do that with the clicks, the buttons down here, all right? You'll also notice that I have navigation built into this page. So the navigation at the top, or your header, is built into the template along with the footer, okay? So good to know. But again, back to our point, right? I don't want to build a blog site here. I'm building a business site, all right? So if I go into this template, you'll notice at the template level that I've got all the same design capabilities that I do at the page editing level, all right? So this was very confusing to me. Thanks to Jamie Marsland, he kind of pointed this out through one of his videos. I took one of his courses and asked about this in some detail, and he kind of picked up on my frustration with this a little bit. So we went through it and talked about it. And the thing that I had gotten caught up in is I actually started developing the page at the template level. So I was doing all my design work, dropping images, all of that stuff here into the front page template, when technically I should have been using the home page and incorporating the template into that page. But what I found out is, because you can only use one page for the front page template, it doesn't really matter, right? You can put all the stuff you want into the front page template. It's going to correlate right over into the home page anyway. So it's really just, two ways to accomplish the same goal. It's not recommended, though, that you add content into your templates, right? But this weird thing with the front page template and WordPress and the block editor, I don't know why they created it the way they did. I really don't need a front page template. I'd rather just either create my own or use one of the other templates that will fit for the front page. So whatever, okay? That's the way it works. You'll notice, though, that I am restricted on my home page. We go over to only using certain templates, okay? If I go to change template, I don't get to choose the front page template that I just added, all right? So big gotcha here. This drove me nuts. I want to make a front page. I went and added the front page template to my template library. I go to my home page. I want to select that template and it's not here, right? Why not? Well, it goes back to that original setting in reading, all right? If you want to have access to the front page template, you have to select the static page for your home page display, and then you have to choose the page that you want for your home page, okay? And then I can select a post page here as well, which we'll do down the road. I'm not going to do that now. And then I'm going to save my changes, all right? And now, when I go back into my pages, you'll notice something has changed, all right? Now, my template is now the front page template, okay? And you'll notice that I cannot change that template, all right? So now that I've dedicated the home page in my reading settings to the home page for the site, I am locked into using the front page template, okay? Fine. Crazy, I know, but that's how it works. That's how you make sure that you're getting the front page template in use correctly, and those are the steps that you'll have to go through if you get caught in this trap, all right? So you have a direct correlation between the reading settings and the template that you can choose for your front page. All right, so going back now to our templates. So now we've got some things to look at, all right? And you'll notice the front page template still has all this, the blog stuff in it, all right? Even though it's not displaying on the page. Again, it gets a little bit confusing in how all of this works, all right? Another reason why I just don't bother very much with the templates, other than the blog pages that I might be using, or if I'm doing a site where people are developing content and I want to restrict how they can design their pages, okay? Those are really the only two cases where I see templates being useful at all. So for this front page template, right, which I can see right here, for our use, we don't need any of this, right? It's got a query loop in here. It's got all the stuff I need to go and build a basic blog page. And that's not what I'm doing, right? So I'm just going to get rid of all this. And I'm going to get a warning, all right? Be careful. Don't worry about it. Delete it, okay? So now in my template, I've only got the header and the footer, and I'll talk about these in a second, all right? But basically I've got, by default, and you'll see that these are colored purple. They're colored purple because I can't change them because they're synced patterns, all right? And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but you're not going to be able to touch these or edit them once you go into the page edit mode in the block editor, all right? So a very important point. So I'm going to save this off, and I'm going to add a new block here. One block to fix all of this, all right? And it's the content block. So I selected the content block. You notice it created a little block down here for me. And I'm going to drop that back up into the middle of my two sections here, okay? So I've got my header, got my footer, and I've got my content. And let's talk about the content. So don't have a background image, but I'm going to change the background color. All right. And let's see, what else do I want to do? I'm going to change the background color of my header as well, okay? So my header and footer are in my patterns. So going back one step, here at the design menu, I'm going to select patterns. I've got my header and I've got my footer. I want to go in and edit these. I do it from here, all right? So here is my header, and I want to add a background color to this. And I'm going to choose the same color, purple. So here's another gotcha. So if I go back to my front page template, I've got my header now, I've got my content, and I've got my footer. Notice something about the spacing here, okay? I cannot tell you how many hours I spent trying to figure out why this was looking like this. So I got all the content displayed in the content. This is just in there by default, just to really, to kind of show you how things are going to look. None of this content is actually there, right? So it's just built into the block. But you'll notice that I'm spaced up below my WordPress test navigation bar, or my header, right? And I have nothing down below. And then all of my paragraphs have all this, a ton of space in between them. So this is where your default global settings under layout can really get you in trouble, all right? And this is why I say when you go and set your global settings, you've got to go and knock all this stuff back to 0, okay? So where that change is right here in the block spacing. And if you've got block spacing still at the default and it's tuned up into 20 or whatever that number is, you're going to really struggle to get everything on your site spaced correctly, okay? So I'm going to save those now back to 0. And I'm going to go back into my template, and you'll notice that space is gone and all the space between my paragraphs is gone, okay? So now I've got the template where I want it. And look, this is basically an empty template, all right? Except for the header and except for the footer, which I don't need either, right? You can go build your own headers. You can go build your own footers. We'll go through how to do some of that, especially if you're going to do different navigation on different pages, which I often do. So I might have 2 or 3 different headers that I can use. And I may want to build them outside of the default theme header that comes with the whatever theme I've chosen. Okay, so now I've got my front page template where I want it, okay? And that's really all I need to do. Now I'm ready to go and start working on my site. So if I go back to my pages, now I've got my home page is set up with the right template. So I've got the front page template there. You'll notice all the spacing between the paragraphs has now shifted. I can now go in and start adding things into this site, all right? And I don't need a lot of this, so I'm just going to delete a bunch of it. Okay, so another tip that we've talked about in the last tutorial, I'm going to mention it again here. What you see is not what you get, okay? So let's just throw a little paragraph in here. Okay, save that. And then let's go look at the page, right? So I would expect this page to, just have the title and this paragraph, and I would expect it to look very similar to what it looks like in the block editor, but it doesn't, okay? This is what it looks like, right? There is no title. Both the navigation, the header and footer are still there, and the paragraph is, basically set all the way to the left. Right, so it's justified to the far left in the view, all right? So this view and this view are totally different, all right? And there's a couple things going on in here that we need to go and fix. So we'll go back and do that. But one of the things that you have to pick up on, and it'll start changing as we add content to this, which is a little bit crazy too. But we'll get into that as well, is, go look at your page from the actual page itself, okay? Don't take the editor for granted. If there's something in the editor that you're seeing that doesn't look right, chances are when you go and look at the actual page, what the real display is going to look like, that issue won't be there, okay? But I can see a couple things here when I'm going and looking at this page. So the reason this section where I have the paragraph is still, got a purple background, is I set that at the content block back in the template, all right? So it's going to pull everything I put into that template into this page, even though I can't actually see it here when I look at the page, all right? So I've got a paragraph in here, and I've got, it doesn't show me a content block anywhere, right? So all I see are the things that I can control outside of the template, all right? So everything that's in the template isn't really visible to me in this view, all right? So we're going to go back to our template. We're going to update the front page, get rid of the background color, save that, go back to our patterns, to our header, same thing. We don't need a background color for the header, so we'll get rid of that. All right, now we're back to normal. So now I've got a nice clean page, and I can start adding content, okay? And what content would I like to add? Well, let's get into this, all right? So where you're going to get to and where we're going to help you start building towards is this tab, right? So if I go and hit the plus button, the block inserter button, and I select the patterns tab up here, I can see all of the patterns that are built into the theme, okay? So I can look at all of them. This isn't the, this is one way to go and do it. I'd rather just be able to scroll through them all here. It just kind of drives me nuts, so you got to look page to page. But basically what I can start doing is I can start just dropping whole sections into my site, okay? So one after the other, I can, you can see all these are the base Ollie themes. And now just like that, I've got a whole ton of content and sections, all kind of, spaced out correctly. I've got buttons in here. I've got cool icons, right? So I've got a ton of stuff in here that I can use as a, initial building platform, all right? You get full control over these. So as I go in and start looking at titles, right, if I want to go in and start changing stuff, I can go and do that here, okay? If I want to change any of the settings on this, I can do all of that as well. I don't need global, I just need local. So if I want the background color to be different for this, I can change that this way as well, all right? So I get full control over all of these, unlike a different type of pattern, which we'll talk about in a little bit, okay? But here's the struggle. These patterns are great. I mean, they're actually really good compared to other themes. This is part of your theme selection process that you should be going through. And how do I go and, get as much development work done from the patterns as I can initially, all right? So to me, that's my goal if I'm selecting a different theme. I want to make sure it's got a bunch of good fonts. It's got some good color palettes, and then I want to make sure it's got some good pre-built patterns that I can go in. Maybe I can make some edits to get them kind of where I want for a particular site, but that I can go in and really start building out portions of the site from a layout perspective without having to go and do all of this manually, right? So, I mean, this is really nice. It lays out really nice. If I go look at this page now at the, the page view, obviously I've got some work to do from the, the page layout view here, but from here I can start looking at, what this is going to look like in mobile mode, what it's going to look like in like a tablet mode, and I can start to see how everything moves around when I start changing the screen size, okay, which is really important. So going back to our patterns then, I can go and put as many of these in here as I want. I can move them around, right? So now you start to see some of the power of the block editor when you're using patterns. So here's the fun part though, right? If I want to go and start making some changes to these things, so this is a grid, right? So you got features in here. You got lots of different stuff. This is actually a stack block, right? So this is a text group. So say I want to go, is this stack has the color assigned to it? Yes. All right, so say I want this stack to be a different color. All right. One of my selections, and this is kind of where some of the magic starts to happen with the block editor, is I can create a pattern now from this pattern. And I can say Bob's first pattern. I can put it in a category. I don't really care about the categories. Doesn't really matter. And then by default, you'll see that this is a synced pattern, okay? And a synced pattern basically means that I'm only going to open up certain portions of the pattern itself to being changed in the design, all right? And it's mostly going to be, you know, paragraphs, headers, images, other things that are really content related versus things like background, you know, sizing, location, margin, padding, all of that stuff can be locked down, right? Which is nice if I want to, you know, have sections of a site that I want to be able to change in, you know, over time, right? So, you know, if I want to change my color scheme for a site and I don't want to have to go into, you know, a pattern that I've used 20 times through the site and change each one individually, I can use a synced pattern so that I can change at the pattern level, and it'll then you move that change through all of the patterns that are, you know, all of that pattern that are deployed through the site. Okay, so it's a nice feature. I actually don't use it very much, so most of my patterns tend to be unsynced. And I'll bite the bullet if I got to go and update 20 different patterns. I like to have the control on the design, but now I've gone and saved that pattern. I can go back into my pattern library, and I now have a section called My Patterns. All right, and you can see Bob's first pattern is not synced, and now it's in here. Okay, and if I want to, I can start making changes to it here. Okay, so I can change it at the pattern level. These, you know, the changes, because I didn't sync this, are not going to be seen back on the home page where I originally used it, right? Because that is going to be a desynced pattern, and I'm not going to then be able to generate changes from the pattern level. This will only be changes that I would pick up then at, you know, when I deploy this as a new pattern. Okay. But now you kind of get the idea of what you can do with WordPress patterns, right? And I can build patterns for all of these things, all right? So for me, this is the magic of WordPress. This is where everything really starts to happen. I can build really easy to use patterns. So just a couple columns. So let's go and show you how to do that. So if I go back to my home page, and I want to edit it. Let's say, you know, I've got that first paragraph. I want a couple really easy column patterns that are empty. So let's show you what that looks like. You can see it down here on the bottom. All right, so here's my column now. It's not using the full width, so I want it to be full width, always full width, because I can control the, you know, the width in the padding and margin to the degree I need to. And then, you know, I can control how many columns are in, you know, the overall columns here. So if I want to add more, I can. So I'm typically going to use 3 and 5 column blocks, okay? And then for each individual column, I can set the page width or the width for that column. And I can do it as a percentage. I can do it at pixels. I can do it at rem, em. I typically am always going to use the percentage. Okay, it works really well for me. Works really well for the mobile platform and the tablet platform as well. So for me, I set my outside pattern to 10. I'm going to set my outside column to 10%. My center column, I'm going to set to 80. You can do the math, right? Going to add up to 100%. And then my last column will also be 10%. Okay. So now I've got a nice little column. Just so we can see it, I'm going to change the background. And there's my column. I got a little bit of padding built in, it looks like. So something you'll figure out with WordPress as well is that, did you see that happen? Even though my padding up and down is on the far left spot, it put padding in there anyway, right? So I went and just adjusted it back to 0 and it went away, okay? So if you want to go rewatch that, you can do that. But both of them they actually had default numbers, positive numbers in there, and then I had to go back in and make them 0 myself, okay? So now I've saved that, and if I want to just take that bare 3 columns and make that a pattern, which I always do on my site, so I don't have to go spin up a column and then do all the adjustment for 10%, 80%, whatever. I can go, figure out the width of the page that I'm going to be using, how I want my columns to render, right? So I'm always going to want those 2 outside columns to have 10% width, right? So it kind of squeezes everything into the center. And then if I want a 3-column grid or a single column, which is kind of be, going to be, a large section of a page maybe. If I want a hero section, it's probably going to be, the 2 outside columns and then 2 inside columns. So I'll probably just have a 4-column, section, and I can save all of those as my own patterns. All right. So I can say here, 3 columns. Okay. And if I want to make a category columns, I can do that. I'm going to select unsynced. I wish I could make unsynced as my default. I often forget to uncheck it. So another thing to add for WordPress developers down the road. And that's it. So now I've got a new pattern. So if I want to go and add another 3-column pattern, I can just go into my patterns and I can choose my 3-column pattern. And voila, I've got another 3-column pattern. That's just like the first one I chose, okay? So now I can start, building little base blocks, right? Where I have the base pattern structure that I want to use. And if I want, I can start adding things into this. I can, make blocks in blocks and so on, right? Which we're going to get into really heavily in the next tutorial. So that's it for this one. There's templates and patterns. Real quick summary. Templates are really to be used for controlling pages where the people working on those pages are only doing content, right? You want to lock down the design, you want to lock down all the spacing, you know where things are going to be located in the page, and people on the outside are just going to be developing content for that page, loading an image, and you pretty much control what the design and look and feel of that page is going to be. Okay. The other thing templates are good for are blogs and single page blog posts, right? So especially if you've got a bunch of people writing on the site, you can lock down what the pages are going to look like, and you can control things at the template level. So if you want to change the design down the road, you can do all of that in the template, all right? So at the end of the day, templates are really synced patterns, if you think about it that way. So you can do similar things with both, right? So, technically you could get away from templates altogether if you just stuck with some sync patterns. So, one way to solve some of those problems. I think that's it. Patterns for me are the core thing of the block editor that you're going to get the most value out of, right? Once you figure out what your pattern library is going to look like and the things that you like to go and build repetitively, and you get those into a theme that you can reuse, you're off to the races. You can literally go and do a whole layout for a site in probably just a couple seconds. Okay. Same with the header and footer. You can go build patterns that you like. You can make your website development effort much more seamless, much more easy, and much more repetitive. Okay, which is the ultimate goal of being a really strong web developer. Okay. So that's it for today. Thanks very much for watching. Try to get the next video out in the next week or two. We're coming up on the holidays here in the U.S., but I got a couple other things stacked up, so we'll get to work on it here shortly. Looking forward to it. Thanks again for watching. Have a great day.